Good evening, how are you? My name's Bianca, as you remember, and we're continuing the story of That Reminds Me. And you can hear, but I'm at the yard, so please excuse the background noise. But people are busy upstairs in the gym. I know, as if it's a youth space and people are using it. Who would have thought? Anyhow, let's continue. Change. Annecy, the weight of the world can never fall on the sky. So this is why your father has no empathy for me. Does he sleep to my stories, or are you weaving words without care? Creep to his bedside and wake him with his pleas, and I'll wait for the raindrop that proves his sympathy. 1. The distance behind us pulled itself into shapes in motion. Something trying to be free, and the night exposing something troublesome. The four of us stopped as the pacing got closer, the urgency in the stride, frequency preparing us for a loss. Phones! My white friends pulled out their 3210s and Nokia face-offs, while I felt in my pocket thinking I could assemble a secular on a secular level. Using shaking fingers, the feelings drawing attention to the coins in my pocket, to bend reality. In this moment, I was the shelves I had stolen from and the purses I had pillaged. Justified, I thought. Because it was unfair that others had things and my material wants were endlessly sought satisfaction. You're safe. You don't need to worry. They said it like I should know better, like they were tired of explaining this. Slowly, they headed back into half-light that housed them. The four of us continued on our walk home, then feeling naked and robbed, not because of their loss, but because I was safe. Bad boys weren't just mindless men morphed from the darkness, but people like me. I looked at my friends and for the first time I felt a power. I was sure that they could see. I was no longer worried they would leave. There were others just like me. 2. I watched a little black boy standing outside a shop, pretending not to be bothered by his white friends inside spending money. I walk over and I give him a £2 coin and remind him to eat whatever he buys before he gets home. My mum wouldn't approve, so I know that his mum wouldn't either. Wide his eyes look like mine, and I fall in love and how grateful everything about him becomes. Safe man, he says. He smells like cocoa butter and DAX. And I follow up his scent to the door and watch as he stands in front of the colourful sugars with snappy names. I know he's savouring being spoilt for choice. I'm sure when he takes a bite of whatever he buys, I too will be satisfied. And a memory comes back to me of the first time I held a £1 coin, given to me by a stranger who smelt like cigarettes and blue magic. 3. My mum carried around the ultrasound now come to life, an image swollen with my future, to show me nothing's black and white. I imagined a fragile sticker on her stretch-marked stomach, and always walked behind her as she climbed the stairs. We'd fall asleep together. Me, supposed to be watching over her, but getting caught up in the faggy of her movements. I would wake up, and I would wake before her and lift the kente from her stomach, the cloth getting acquainted with who it held up, and I imagine the smile of my soon-to-be sibling. And as I'd fall back to sleep, I'd ask the bump for their name, and I'd glide my fingers over the stretches and the paths, trails to a world, and a body's resistance to the light. Dribbling in the room became spittle in a bucket. Only my hands touched it, and pouring it out was simply wiping the baby's mouth. When my father walked out, and I walked in, with a cornetto in one hand and my pocket smelling of deep heat, then my mum grabbed my hand so I could feel its kicks. And as I touched her stomach, I knew it was a palm trying to connect with me through the skin, and the bond with my brother touchingly began. Chapter 4. She says she can't get up, that my dad looked down at her and walked away, his steps silent like a stranger, like no one, only hissing sounds between his lips as he sucked the other evening's meat through his teeth. Just another day. Her hand is on her hip, a position she's used to, dancing alone to a beat she doesn't own. My bedroom door is open, so she crawls across the floor. Metamorphosis, to my father, has chosen to ignore. Good evening, how are you? The baby's crying, but whimpers of a worn-out soul. The hospital holds no excitement. Who am I holding this time? My mum, she's too weak to hold her head. I lean over and I let her hear the heart she brought forth to beat out the sadness. A child soaking it all up. She cries little hiccups, trying to open her mouth to speak. I lift her to see her cheek and give it a kiss intended for two. Mum, I'm sure she would have loved you as much as we do. Chapter 5. I'm on first name terms with my dad, the man my mum says should be on my birth certificate. I see him sometimes, usually once when he returns from Accra, business trips that require Primark gifts and 6 months saved salary. This mouse-like miser of a man would suddenly open up, speaking and giving enthusiastically when a runaway crossed his mind. Now, I've been building the courage for years, trying to pull my voice from a well deepened with every strike, intimidated by the wealth of his arm when he wore traditional garb. As a child, I wished the colours of his kente would so cling to him and give me a father whose personality was luminous. Instead, he passed on a darkness to my eyes, but now I have the courage, just enough strength to go against the awkward, ominous silence that will follow my questions. A few years ago, I would have shielded my face, hearing a feather float. A silence spoke of my violence, an oncoming slap or a fist. A release to appease a broken heart for a life that God didn't give. I asked why he didn't show us any love. Behave like fathers who teased me as a child. Kay, I'm incapable, he says. His head is low and I can see he is boldened for the first time. His Ghanaian humidity betrays his Nigerian features. My dad, you don't know, he says. When he used to see me on the market, he would ignore me. I don't know. And for a moment, I'm soft enough to let the weight of his confession mould me, leaving an impression I'd carry round with me from now until the end. But then I remember years ago a man's voice from my bathroom telling someone on the phone he loves them. My mum was asleep upstairs, and the next day was my dad's 4th trip of the year to Ghana. 6. The hospital visits were every 6 months. Time off school isn't as fulfilling when you can't blink without pain, move your hand or cough without feeling the pressure of living. Tests showed no allergies, but my dad returning stopped the symptoms that started with his departure. His presence felt oppressive, but without him my body reacted the way I wouldn't allow my emotions to. On regular days I'd greet him and take his groans or yes, but returning salutes revealed a truth. How are you? You taking it easy? It brought him back from his home. 7. He'd had enough practice. You could tell by the dark stains on the top of his shoes. I wouldn't let him used to dragging his feet, so I lifted him out of his stroller, pushed him overhead. His soles glided back and forth, faintly above my shoulder, giving him a taste of what it felt like to be above me. He has to be my saviour, my reason for living. He baptised me. Saliva on the top of my head like syrup, spreading over my thoughts, my brother so lovable. He came forward, swaying, or maybe the floor was shaken, but in the moment I couldn't tell, so I focused on the miracle of teaching that anything else seemed possible. He stood a few centimetres in front of me, 1 foot forward, his left, but I'd seen him beat his bowl of baby food with his right. He remained in that position, his torso teetering, a boxer learning to stay in the fight. Our local shopkeeper called him Tyson. My brother, big for his age, and his chubby bald fist resembled a baby boxing glove. But here, before me, his hands were open, stretched, out in front of him, because he wanted to be picked up and laid his head beside my neck. But as I had, he would have to work for affection. Nothing would come to him. He brought his left leg back and started with his right. My smile at his discovery excited him and added to his unbalanced shaking, the unsteady jittering of laughter and weak legs. His left foot followed, and then his another step, then another and another. P, you're doing it. His joy from the journey nearly toppled him before he fell into my arms. It was a victory for us both. 8. A boat party on the Thames is the first time Miss Harry speaks to me. There was a purposeful avoidance in the way she walked round me in the class, collecting other students' work with small talk, but acting in a daze when she lifted my sheets. During an assembly where she sank comfortably into her seat, she rose to reveal a pink thong above her curving, concealing trousers. The laughter, I thought, was forced, to dissolve the embarrassment. But for me, I didn't laugh. I just looked at her, and she looked back. Now I'm leaning over the sea, watching its foamy, soapy, so fish stay fresh, reflecting the corner of the sky where the moon is bubble wrapped in darkness to protect it from poets. Miss Harry walks over and asks why I'm out here alone, and I answer with the truth, that I was hoping for sympathy would compel feet heading for another dance to walk out of the fresh air and let me dream as I had the chance. Miss Harry says anyone would be lucky. My left arm goes numb, and she's staring at me to see what she's done. Thank you, miss, I say. I bring back the structure, the scaffolding of the school, and the respect of my posture. She stares over the edge of the boat, focusing on the spit of the sea, thinking it must be satisfaction these dark bodies of water receive. A smile and she walks away, a secret pressed tightly in her gait. Once out of sight, I turn back to the distance. The wind whistles with my pining, a soft sound above water, a sympathy without rain, a heart pierced without pain. Our bathroom was filled with bath soap instead of bars and shower gel, my mum being unable to tell the difference, so when I tried to masturbate for the first time, the right consistency was close to hand. For a few seconds I rubbed and expected the suds to create a sensation that would turn me into a man. At 15, my cousins brushed beards between bringing out their dicks for bankster. So I assumed maturity flourished because they were open to tags like onum, testosterone. I thought must be forcing hair from follicles, and being versed in the use of a phallus made everything sexual well balanced and uninteresting, and only useful when ticks signalled moving hands or rare consensual pleasure. To them, a flaccid penis was nothing amorous until engaged. But now at 18, my beard still failed to connect, and porn is a page I haven't turned yet. 10. Once the satisfaction speaks to my entire body, it becomes clear that not all sins are equal. As taught, I tie a knot in the latex opening, place the field in the tissue and put it into my pocket. My hand hovers over the youthful respectable, while I hum songs of worship as I was taught to as a child. Garden gospels as I would clap to, trying to give move my mother would praise. God's jealousy of old flies through folds of time. Forgiving my mum being defied, but standing above, peering down like a parent who'd never been satisfied. Every night I prayed the same prayer through compulsion and fear of the numerous. But tonight, I'll fail to bring my palms together without regret at not having tried a different position. She had invited me in, put her hands on my shoulder and collapsed me into the chair. She moved the thin paper into her mouth like an unleavened bread, prepared me, then moved material to the side, lowering the experience of her sins on my thighs. And as I sat on her tongue, Jonah 1:3, no longer able to spit out James 4:17, to save me from the judgment of my desires. The journey home, the bus deserted, I hold the seat in the front, a crash imminent, and my hands secure as I rest my head on the forearms, thinking back to when I pushed her thighs off my own, fearing I'd fall out the chair as it groaned. And as I draw back to my street and stare blankly at my phone, a mirror blazing, I feel the heat of hell, unmistakably my own. Excuse me. 11. I found porn between my dad's vinyl of Prince and Rick James. Its plastic casing reminded me of pirate games cheating companies. I was disgusted by partial arousal because I'd never known sex. The pressure, the pulsing, the sweat, the post-revulsion. But I felt close, and that's what I want. I daydream of dissolving, reaching for you to join my dissolution. Our skin touching, I imagine we become who would like to be ourselves. But we're blocked, never really touching, scientifically speaking, and not looking observed while we're fucking. I said I'd rather not tonight, but I know the mood swing will end in a fight. manipulation, out of sight. So I give in and take it in, a smooth swallow, then a rapturous applause, building only to plummet to slow palms, a sarcastic clap. A peak nearly reached, I climb the crescendo one more time. I feel like I'm going to die, shrieks and scratches on my chest, shouts to go louder, having nothing left. So out of breath, out of my zone, I climax of dreaming of being at home. And then we're done, both bereft, smouldering without satisfaction. A fire-drained of air, her bloodshot side eye makes me want to run and hide. She needs a man, and I am a boy. She wants to make love, and I want to be in love. I imagine myself small knees up, my temples against my caps, and my arms wrapped around them. 4 steps past me, and someone asks, "But there's something wrong with me?" I climb out of bed, pretending to scratch my pubic hair to conceal my felicity. I close the bathroom door with my head in my hands, feeling my penis retreating, embarrassed by how we're leaving. I sit on the seat and I cry. 12. I've been cosplaying with the clothes since earning the money to fill my wardrobe, starting with 2 3-piece suits hanging either side of the railings like large ornaments, earrings on a face that doesn't need much dressing. Tracksuit But one thing stayed the same since I started pushing my burden uphill every day. My dark shades that hid my red eyes, but can't fall in tears. Feet firm in the front of my mirror as the moon looks on, of my muses the same, wondering which of me is standing before you today. Am I regular at my brother's school? The sight of me always draws an embarrassed but proud look upon his face. Older brothers emanate power, but bring them fancy into focus. We're watched as we walk out, and I know tomorrow he'll be asked for the 10th time, "Is that guy your brother?" He's one step away from a sprint, struggling to keep pace with me as we walk alone. Neither of us talking, but enjoying being seen together. We're looking after him and feeling him like my equal. We're stepping into the house before he asks what's for dinner. He can smell the rice but wants to be wrong. I want to be wrong. The corned beef stew on the tongue becomes a taste of peri-peri chicken. Go and get changed and I'll dish your rice. He takes his time and sits on the edge of the sofa, knees ready to the plate, tray and rice. I bring in the Nando's, and again there's that smile, embarrassed but proud. 14. Outside the eyes of God there are no sins, and I learned deceit when I decided to give my life to Christ. Timid, with a voice too weak to reach salvation, I was told to speak up and be heard, bounce my words off the drums of God, played by young West African boys, waiting for citizenship, but finding home in church. My pastor, their daddy, told stories of sex, drugs, their first testimony, matrimony, and I'm sure years later he succumbed to infidelity. Sins are stories given to Annecy to warn children at bedtime, a web of lies filled and taken over by the locust, invading and from across the sea. What didn't touch the brink of spiritual abuse was spoken of by gargling deacons as sipping on the devil's juice. I rested on community seats as the horn of judgment bellowed from the throat of our leader, and I feel no rapture. I knew it was over. I knew as I sat and soothed myself with musical thoughts of consequences played out over inherent values, that purple rain contained no trumpets. I smiled as all the heads bowed for the closing prayer, mine containing only a thank you. I stood and turned my back to the pulpit, attentive to the standard of goodness, without the worship of crucified statues. 15. I took bread out of the freezer and heard the front door slamming. A sound from swallowed up half-banshee screams of my cousin, who apparently had barely survived. His pace had saved him from stumbling to the other side. He wanted something, anything. "Where is it?" he asks. "Hurry up and get the ting." I put my hand into the sandwich maker to gorge the heat. I've been craving roasting for toasted bread and margarine since I woke up, since the smell of weed and soaked socks drying on the radiator took over from the oily stench of cockroaches. I'd shaken off a small one-off toothbrush, and it held it under the running tap, only for a few seconds, remembering would get billed for that. While my cousin, Ghanaian, so not bonded by blood, told whoever was outside to suck their mum. Yes, the day had now begun. I took my breakfast into the sitting room, but stood to eat, my cousin not even noticing me, watching him dig something out of the back garden grass. 2 of his friends on guard, but blocking his path. How long will all of this last? I took a bite of toast and felt the melted marinade between the teeth. A passage where the working class meet. A cousin found what I'd been looking for, and I turned away, pushing crumbs off my vest, thinking about the Doppler effect, knowing I'd be hearing sirens next. Act 1. The tapping gets louder the closer I get. I turn into my cousin's street, and the youngest 12 is beating magnetic tags against a concrete garden wall. He keeps a rhythm in a steady tempo, not quite 140 BPM, but close. While he imagines wearing the Adidas tracksuit grime artists get for free, no one knows how anymore, only where, he tells me, JD. But all he sold was the electronics as soon as he got them. Inside the house there's another trill, but this time it's high-pitched excitement in a voice I'm still holding the strain of yesterday's calliope. Too much discord to be a revolutionary chant. I try to take a seat, but no one moves or looks, the narrative holding them hostage, my cousin carrying on with his story. Finally, getting the attention he always wanted, embellishing every interesting detail with a hand gesture I need to dodge. You could film him and he wouldn't notice, a Facebook photo ready. Where were you? I went raving. No after party though, police locked it off. I tried to call you, why? What happened? Act 2. AMI is the new thing, but Northmen don't do it. Only Southmen do. I asked my brother what AMI stands for, and he tells me he can't remember. Our politician is standing in front of microphones held by pale fingers. He is condemning the young black boys who are building on aggressions and revolutions blindly. Yes, but an encroaching state not unforeseen. Then there was a chariot bus in the background, and Hasidic Jew walked past where the camera becomes unfocused. At the end of a jog, I approach him merely in the street. My brother is bleeding from his brow and screaming for me to back it, but I don't. I talk everyone out of their violence. My brother walks towards the house, still seething. I follow, there's blood dripping down his cheek, and when we arrive at the house, he shuts the door in my face. Girls are screaming, black boys are shouting. An arm shoots in and out of the side car. Like a quick morning effort to ruin ice from a windscreen, the blade gleams. I notice in my fear, my cousin asks, "Have you never stabbed anyone before?" Act 3. If you lined up the TVs tuned to news channels, the flames would blow through sets. No respites from the pings of broadcasting messages. BlackBerry is finally used for the business of organisation. The age of spectacle has no limits, no finish applied to the awards handed out for partaking in the farce of revolution. But we saw the shortlist days afterwards, each face boxed in preparation for the body. Before the skies could rumble like the throttle of a god, preparing to speak of what it foresaw in a London pulse starting to be slow, I had saved 20 new numbers in my phone. People I recognised, in the paper would hardly speak to. Someone had to, although the entire ends would probably see it for themselves soon. The day after the riots, I walked through the streets, wondering where the first bottle was thrown. And the urge to repeat the action I had been believed to had been intimidated into history. Dreaming, I had fallen from the mind of Matheson. I walked on through the silent district, knowing the roads felt betrayed. Dole money not paid, so no smoke reached up, as if expelled from the appendix of modern houses blown from the bookies' doorways. But the pavement still had ashes to satiate appetites, leftovers from last night's piece meal. Wandering around, I looked for signs of life, and imagined the animated street was hiding in the only bus in its sight. Its black body tattooed by flames not enough to deter my imagination, but I'll take that away too. I thought, and as my memory comes back from these moments, I'm grateful from the words, "Where were you?" Act 4. We are the police. I feel like Orwell, Owen or Olsen, standing on the sideline and reporting each update. Seconds apart, no profession persuading me, capturing everything. Every bottle thrown, every car set alight, every female officer topped by a miscalculated baton swing resulting in opportunistic Nikes, attempting to stomp her out. I broadcast to another world, my Twitter feed, my daily planet, the place to dump news like leftover thoughts. I was on the train home when the announcement that Hackney Downs reminded me of the London Ember gaining air. The riots reaching disconnected regions, making up for the body of the news. I ran down the station stairs, focused on the fray, taking back roads and the sliding under the police tape. But the scene took me back. I was my father in 85. Seeing so many losing their heads, I stood watching video game of Civ's teams, watching to throw Molotovs, but only managing mojitos. a baby screaming with fire-licking windows, trenchman flames eating up curtains, and a boy, maybe 14, bleeding through his shin because the excitement forced his foot through a glass window but didn't shatter but broke in half. I put my phone down. The novel I was spreading suddenly revealing itself as true crime. I shook off the stupor and joined in with the screams to save the baby and began to help the boy. And that, lovely humans, is where we're going to leave it for today. So we will start again tomorrow, continuing our story. I hope you've had a lovely, relaxing half an hour. It's been really nice getting to a story. There's some really great bits in this, isn't it? It's a very poetical kind of story, and it's sharing some of the quite traumatic things that young people experienced as black young people in Britain. Okay, I'll see you the same time tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Stay well.